We have today Dario Azellini. He is a German academic and film producer and writer that has been, investing the last years traveling, spending his time between Germany and Venezuela in recent years, but he has been also very involved in Mexico social struggles. So I just want to mention some things for the resume. He is contributor and editor of the International Encyclopedia of Revolution in Protest and has published several books, essays, and documentaries about social movements, privatization, military services, migration, and racism in Italy, Mexico, Nicaragua, Colombia, and Venezuela. Among them, there's Hontem Krieg. I don't know if I speak that fine in German. A book about privatization of military services, translated and published in Germany, Argentina, Bolivia, France, Indonesia, Italy, Spain, and Venezuela. And he recently published Participation, Arbeiten Control in the Commune in 2010. Azellini holds a PhD in political science and in sociology. He's a lecturer at the Institute of Sociology in the Johannes Kepler University in Linz, Austria. The documentary Commune under Construction shows local self-government in Venezuela. I believe that you are going to enjoy what he's going to show us today because, according to the information that I have, he's in this new documentary about the whole commune process in Venezuela. He has been able to show the good examples, but also the contradictions within the process that we have been trying to experiment in Venezuela in recent years. So I don't want to take more time from Dario, and I just want to welcome him.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to everybody for being here, and thank you very much to the consulate for inviting me, and thank you very much for Benjamin, my great friend who's invited me and insisted for years that I should be coming to Chicago and present something. As my name sounds, I'm not just German, I'm German-Italian, but linked to Latin America during the last more than 20 years, since '89, that I spent about half of my life, of my year, in different places in Latin America. And one of the questions that always were driving me as an academic and as a person that is socially interested is, how is social transformation possible? And I finally got to Venezuela in 2003 for the first time, and I found it one of the most interesting examples I've ever seen of experiments of social transformation. And that's why I finally more or less stuck in Venezuela and have been there for every year for about 6 months or more during the last 7, 8 years. But always also traveling, teaching, and doing work in other places all over Latin America. When we talk about social transformation, I think it's very important for Latin America because when Latin America got out of the era of the dictatorships, the idea was that implementing liberal democracy, implementing the parliamentary system would automatically bring political rights, social rights, and solve the problems of the Latin American countries. That was at least the idea of all the scholars publishing from the north, and the ones from the south copying the ones from the north. And Antonio dos Santos, for example, said that it's a strange thing that while the scholars writing about social transformation are from the north, and the ones publishing about it are from the north, and they usually don't speak the languages of the south, but all the transformation is going on in the south. So how can you solve this contradiction, you know? And I think one consequence we have to face, if we are or not, whatever political tendency, if like fans or friends of liberal democracy, But one thing that is for sure, that liberal democracy didn't solve the problems. That it didn't go like people thought, that all social problems would be solved just because you've got an institutional frame that is similar to the North or the northern countries. It's quite the contrary. The differences, usually in most countries of Latin America, are today bigger. The social differences between poor and rich than they were 30 years ago. That doesn't make the dictatorships better, but it's a fact. I think it's also because the conditions found in Latin America were very much different than in Europe. So in Europe, I still think that liberal democracy is not a full democracy. But anyway, we can say that at least in the northern countries, in the northern part of the world, liberal democracy for some decades has been a frame to gain more rights. But it also changed with neoliberalism. Now it's the frame where rights are taken away from us. But in the South, it never was a frame for more rights. That's the problem, because it was implemented with totally different conditions. So in the North, we had at least land reforms before, we had the bourgeois revolution that also changed certain power relations in the societies. All that didn't happen in the South. So it was just implementing some kind of institutional network that didn't cope with the changes that didn't happen in Latin America. So it has been and is for a very long time a strong search for another type of democracy in Latin America, and has different expressions and faces. It can be the Argentinian example, it can be different movements in Mexico, it can be a lot of different tries and examples. And Venezuela is one. And is one where they call it participatory and protagonist democracy. That means that participation is clear, protagonism means you don't delegate, you decide on yourself. And the interesting thing from a left perspective, from a transformation perspective from the left, is that the left, be it the socialist, communist one, or the social democratic one, always believed that the state is going to be the central agent of change and the state is going to make it happen. Most communists and socialists believed in some kind of neutrality of the state as just a simple instrument you can just use another way. And social democracy believed in some kind of autonomy of the state. But as we know from the examples of social democratic countries in Europe, or the whole East even worse, it didn't work that the state is the central agent of change. In the movements and in the left, and the idea came up starting with the French, Turin, and others in the 80s, well, it's just a movement. We don't have nothing to do with the state, and don't. But that also didn't work, because if you don't have the state doesn't permit you to just build autonomy. The moment you mean some kind of menace to the power of the state, and even if it's just imagined, the state is going to crush the movement, and that's the historical experience. So that's why I found this example of Venezuela so interesting. The idea to what I called some kind of two-track approach. So from below and from up and from below. So from the constituent power, so the collective force of creating something new from below, and the constituent power, the existing institutions. The idea, and Chavez repeated that 100 times, is that the state has to be overcome because it's part of the old. It can't be creating the new. It's part of it's grown out of the capitalist system, so it can't be the instrument to overcome capitalism and social inequality. The state is not there to change, but it's to preserve the status quo. So the idea is that the state should open up the spaces where the new can be created from below. That's the idea in Venezuela. And that's, I think, a very interesting and appealing idea. And it's also very contradictory. It's contradictory because even if the orientation